Hello everyone, after covering Godzilla videos in the first movie, the Showa, Heisa, Millennium Godzilla series, in today's video I'll be talking about Shin Godzilla. This is the first Toho Godzilla movie in 12 years when this movie came out, since Godzilla Final Wars. It's the 29th Godzilla movie in the Toho franchise, minus the American Godzilla movies. In America it's called Godzilla Resurgence. It's never a Godzilla movie with an alternate title when it's distributed here in America. This current Godzilla series is known as the Reiwa era. I'm not sure I'm saying that word right. According to my friends, the reason why they call each different Godzilla series a new name is based on who the emperor is in Japan. This is the first Godzilla movie in the Reiwa era. Sorry if I'm not saying that right again. I wanted to see this movie when it came out back in 2016, but I was too busy with personal things at the time. It came out in Japan this summer 2016, but only had a limited release here in the USA, when it was distributed by the Funimation. After the 2014 Godzilla American reboot, this was once again another response from Toho showing that we do better with Godzilla movies than you do. US Godzilla movies can't beat Toho. Not that Godzilla 2014 was bad or horrible like 98 Godzilla was. It had a mixed response. It was hit or miss for some Godzilla fans. I'll talk about that later when I cover 2014 Godzilla. But just like the Godzilla 98 movie, it's true they say, history does have a weird way of repeating itself. It's a reboot, not a follow continuity from the first original Godzilla movie from 1954. Not only did it in the Heist and Millennium series, make a new sequel, ignore the other previous ones. This movie is basically its own thing. None of these characters are related to the past characters from the first movie. This movie reinvents Godzilla's origin. The original Godzilla movie is mutated into a dinosaur, and this movie is made from these aquatic organisms mutated by nuclear waste, and emerges into a giant scary creature. Throughout the movie, we see Godzilla mutate, evolve, and grow rapidly. This is also the first time in this lifetime we have two different Godzilla series at the same time. We have the American and the Toho Godzilla movies. This movie is directed by Hideaki Anano. Again, I'm not sure I'm saying his name right. Once again, I apologize. Who's known for creating the anime series Neon Genesis Evangelion. It was also co-directed by Shin Godzilla. Again, I probably butchered his name. Once again, I apologize for that. This guy was an assistant special effects director on Godzilla in 1984. He also did special effects for the 90s Gamera movies. This is the second highest grossing Japanese movie in Japan in 2016. It's also one of the highest grossing Godzilla movies ever to date. This movie was nominated for 11 Japan's Academy Awards and winning 7 awards. The movie won Best Picture, Director, Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, Best Lighting Direction, Best Sound Recording, and Best Film Editing. This was authentic, another unique Godzilla movie since GMK. It really felt like Godzilla, especially when it's made by Toho. It was the first sense of neo-realism of a Godzilla movie since the first one. It was very dark and political since the original first one, and the 1984 Return of Godzilla. It was the second being the closest Godzilla movie with similar themes as the first movie. It was a different take on Godzilla than what we were normally used to. Godzilla does not fight giant monsters in this movie. He does not fight Rodan, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Baragon, Anguirus, Orga, Megagyrus, or no Jet Jaguar. The last time Godzilla did not find any giant monsters in a movie was in The Return of Godzilla in 1984. The movie opens up with the classic old Godzilla roar. Then the movie cuts to ocean Tokyo Bay of the coast of Yokohama. Something is spotted offshore Hanada Airport, and of course it's Godzilla, but you only see a glimpse of his tail. Then you see film footage. This opening scene felt like a found footage, like Blair Witch Project on a bigger camera budget. It also makes you think of a reference to Return of Godzilla, searching for civilians on an abandoned boat, but there are no signs of any civilians on the boat this time, like in Return of Godzilla. Water explosion, people are taking photos, video footage on their phone, posting them on social media. It's growing worldwide. We see how the government takes the news and having meetings on what to do in this situation to respond to the oil crisis. As time goes on, we see how the Japanese government have not gotten much sleep or bathed in Lord knows how long. From doing research about the making of this movie, it's one of the first times in a Godzilla movie they used CGI in Godzilla. It was not the traditional guy in a rubber suit, but from seeing behind the scene photos, I saw a guy wearing a green screen suit. So basically semi, but not traditional. In Godzilla's first scene, I did not realize that it was Godzilla. I thought it was another new giant monster he was going to fight in this movie. This might also be the first time seeing Godzilla metamorph and mutate into a giant monster. He crawls like a snake, destroying buildings, Then he walks on all fours like a stegosaurus until he eventually walks on 2 feet. The look of Godzilla is alright, but probably not one of my favorite Godzilla look designs. He looks like a volcano, but that's just my opinion. His scenes were badass though. It's always fun to watch Godzilla scenes, see him destroy buildings, being attacked by the military. It was the first time I've seen Godzilla shoot fire from his tail and his back spikes. He blows up Japan like Independence Day style. It had a lot of great cinematography camera angles of Godzilla when he's walking over Tokyo. It had some cool shots of Godzilla swinging his tail over houses. Seeing the people's reaction, running away, being scared, seeing a big giant monster attacking Japan. Just like the first movie, the night scenes are very scary. Not knowing how far Godzilla is, can stomp on the people. As usual, the military tries to use weapons to attack Godzilla, but it does not work. But at night, whatever missiles they used on Godzilla, he bleeds. I haven't seen Godzilla bleed since the 70s Godzilla movie. Also, after he was shot by some missiles, Godzilla glows and breathes fire. This causes concern how much radiation Godzilla used. The radiation is high and people must quarantine for 49 hours in about 2 days. Just like the first movie, it shows the post-Godzilla disaster. People recovering from injuries, little kids getting separated from their parents, trying to find their missing loved ones. This is the kind of movie of an example of how the government would react if a real Godzilla showed up. It's also the first time I've seen a Godzilla movie where it bounces back and forth between political meetings, the military, and Godzilla, and they were trying to figure out options to destroy Godzilla. If one did not work out, they went to plan B, C, and D. Also, how Japan asked the US for help despite Japan's complicated relationship over the years with the US since World War II. Japan does not want to repeat history, especially after all they've been through since the Hiroshima bombings of World War II. Also, that they think one solution against Godzilla is to use nuclear warheads to blow up Japan. But again, this reminds me of Return of Godzilla, minus the Russians. I'm getting that claustrophobic and the feeling of fear again. What will they do for the people of Japan when Godzilla is destroyed? And again, it goes back to the first movie. How will people be the same after the disaster of Godzilla? Japan's economy will be negatively impacted by the Godzilla attacks. One of the minor side characters says that man is more frightening than Godzilla. And you know what? You could be right about that. Especially how that's very common in big giant monster movies or alien sci-fi movies. Sometimes it's not the monsters, it's the humans who are the bad guys sometimes. And that nuclear missiles are worse than Godzilla. It can wipe out all of Japan. As I said before, this is probably the second close Godzilla movie in the same spirit as the first movie for its time. But then in modern day technology and social media, it's also the first time I've seen a Godzilla sequel reusing some of the old Godzilla music scores from the original 1950s. But they did use some new music in this movie. This movie is a combination and balance of all the new music for a Godzilla movie. It had that sense of neo-realism like the first Godzilla movie, but this is not even close to being considered a remake for sure. The characters in this movie are alright, but I found some of them boring and not interesting. Especially I was bouncing around a lot. It was hard to be drawn to them, how there was so much going on. You don't get as much time to get to know or connect, relate or understand to these characters as you want to. I'm not saying the acting was bad at all, I just wanted to be drawn to these characters and get to know them. Also, I had way too much subtext where the movie is taking place every second bouncing around from politics office, underground bunkers, the military. Another location was Godzilla's spot and take action on Godzilla. It's like they tried too hard to fit too many characters crammed into one, knowing they were not going to have enough time to get to know every character. From Chris Stuckman's point of view, he says 75% of the movie is full of screen text. They use it a lot in this movie with yellow subtitles, with the Japanese actors, and white subtitles on who this character is and what their job role was. And they use white subtitles on what location they were at. I had to read fast what the bottom said, then get back to what the characters were saying. This is the most subtitles I've seen in a movie. Not that I don't mind reading subtitles when I watch a foreign movie, this one went way overboard. Also, sometimes the dialogue was boring, it had some decent dialogue that I did like sometimes, but it was fast-paced. It was one of the most politically Godzilla movies I've seen since the first one and The Return of Godzilla in 1984. The character Randall Gucci is sort of the main character, was an alright character, but nothing special that interesting. He's a young cabinet secretary who's on his way to moving up the political ladder. We just don't get to know him as well as we want to. If him and his friend were the main focus of this movie, then maybe I could have appreciated this movie a little bit more. But we do see how the situation on Godzilla gets him mentally, psychologically, and how this experience has stressed him out. He's on the verge of a nervous breakdown. But the one character I found interesting I thought was alright was the character Kyoko Ann Patterson. She wants to be the first female president one day. We see how this character's arc changes throughout the rest of the movie, how she went from representing by the US government to help on the Godzilla attacks in Japan. She was an intelligent woman and a little bit of a spoiled, arrogant person at times. She does not appreciate her Japanese heritage at first until later in this movie. When she finds out the US government is planning on dropping the atomic bomb on Tokyo, she learns to appreciate her culture more. When she's ordered by the US government to get out of Japan, she doesn't do it, she stays in Japan. There were some scenes where she spoke English and Japanese because this character was born in the US. From what I've learned from Godzilla fans, she has become a fan favorite in Godzilla fan culture. I'm glad there was no romance between her and Raguchi. This is the kind of movie that did not need a love story subplot. Also, on the side note, this actress is really beautiful. This is a rare time, maybe the first time I've seen this in a Godzilla movie, of protesters saying, "Save Godzilla, Godzilla is God." In past Godzilla movies, people hated Godzilla for all the natural disaster and property damage he caused to Tokyo, and how a lot of people lost their lives who would die from Godzilla attacks. The Prime Minister character reminded me a little bit of the politician Return of Godzilla. Because of the crazy situation dilemma, he's unsure what to do about Godzilla and how he can help the people of Tokyo. He also said, "I did not want to go down like this." He did not want to end his campaign on a bad note, facing Godzilla. He feels bad he must have the people of Japan evacuate from their homes for their safety, of course. He really cares about his country and wants to make sure everyone in Japan is safe and hopes to find a way to help Japan's economy recover from this natural disaster. This is another alright character, but again, I wish he was the second main focus of this movie. This movie is inspired from a tsunami earthquake that Japan had suffered in March 2011, 5 years prior to this movie. It also reflected on the Fukushima nuclear disaster, one of Japan's worst disasters. The movie responds and reflects on these tragedies in Japan. And to this day, Japan is still recovering from those natural disasters. Godzilla was a metaphor in nuclear war in the first movie, and this movie is a metaphor in the oil spill crisis and the tsunami earthquake. The ending surprised me to see how they freeze Godzilla, but it ends on a cliffhanger how we, the audience, want to interpret this ending, and it won't be the fate of Godzilla. My initial thought was like the original Blob, where they freeze the Blob and transport it to the Arctic so it will never unfreeze, but Godzilla probably weighs a lot more than the Blob. I did not realize the camera shot of Godzilla's tail. You see people on his tail coming out of his tail. There are many fan theories of what this means, but I won't go into details on this. Go online and check out for yourself. Before I end this video, here are my friend Christian's thoughts on Shin Godzilla.
So, Shin Godzilla is probably the most unique film in the franchise since GMK, and kind of like GMK, I would almost classify this as an Elseworlds Godzilla story, because this is such a different take on the Godzilla mythos, yet at the same time, this is probably more true to the original 1954 film than just about any of the other Godzilla movies that came in between. I also think this is probably the most Lovecraftian Godzilla movie, because in this movie you get a real sense that Godzilla is something that should not be. Like, you get a real sense that this is something that doesn't belong in our world. The film is also highly political. It's very much making fun of the Japanese government's response to the 2011 earthquake and tsunami, which brought about the Fukushima nuclear meltdown, which is considered to be the worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl. But while this is a very dark movie and has some very dark implications at the end, this is also a really funny film as well. Like that scene where the Japanese Prime Minister is on television saying that there's no chance of this creature making landfall, and then somebody comes up to him on live television to tell him that it has, and I just laughed so hard at that scene.
Before I end this video, here's a brief recap on the Netflix anime Godzilla movies. It's surprising this is the first Godzilla anime movies. One would think how big and popular anime is, that they would have made Godzilla anime movies a long time ago. I'm not sure these movies are considered canon for Godzilla movies in this current era. I will review these movies at some point, but for now, my goal is focusing on live-action Godzilla movies. I won't have time for those. My friend Chris will briefly touch upon these in one of these videos. While it was not perfect, it was pretty good and solid with interesting, unique ideas that I didn't know what to expect when I was watching this movie. I liked it, but I will admit, I did have some minor nitpicks, but it's not stopping me from still enjoying the movie and appreciating for what it is. I might need to give this movie a few more viewings to see if I'll understand the movie a little bit more on a second viewing than the first viewing. As a joke, who knows? Maybe we'll see a crossover of both current Toho Godzilla and the American Godzilla movies together in the same movie. But I won't hold my breath on that one. Then there's the usual, splitting the profits 50-50. It was not a remake of the original Godzilla, but had the same almost semi-spiritual theme as the original. But honestly, I think the next one I'm about to talk about, I think did it better justice in my own opinion, and that is Godzilla Minus One. Stay tuned.